Usato is a hopeless and clueless nobody who got the chance to be with the most popular kids in school. When they get transported to another world, he becomes the next best thing as they find out he has a very rare type of magic. From that moment on, Usato began his new life and decided to abandon all his family and friends since he had a higher chance of picking up girls now. The scene opens up with the two most popular kids in school, Suzune and Kazuki. Just like that, they took the spotlight from MC, Usato Ken, who's nothing but an average kid. Usato builds a nest to help some birds caught in the rain and heads out. He finds out his umbrella has been taken by someone and decides to wait for the rain to stop. The weather definitely had plans for him to remain in that school for all eternity. Luckily for him, Suzune and Kazuki bump into him, and Kazuki lends him an umbrella. That's how Usato got the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to walk home with the cool kids. While they're walking, Kazuki and Suzune start hearing some bell sounds, but Usato doesn't hear anything. A magic circle suddenly pops out on the ground, and they get summoned to a different place. When they wake up, you can see Suzune's crackhead nature showing itself because the girl seems to be too excited about the situation. They find themselves before a king in a throne room. The king introduces himself as Lloyd Vulgast, the king of Linger. He tells them they've been summoned as heroes to help his kingdom fight the Demon King and his army. Kazuki isn't too happy about this, but the king beckons on them to help. Usato then finds out he wasn't even a designated hero since he didn't hear the ringing bells, and once again the MC's spotlight is stolen. The court mage, Welsi, takes them to find out what their affinity for magic is. Suzune and Kazuki have affinities for thunder magic and light magic respectively. When Usato places his hand on the orb, it shows an emerald green light. Welsi panics immediately, and you just know he has probably broken something. She takes him to inform the king, who panics as well after hearing the news. Apparently it's a sign of a very rare kind of magic, and the king is looking for how to send him somewhere far away. Just then, some crazy green-haired lady stomps into the throne room. She introduces herself as Rose, and she's the captain of the kingdom's rescue team. As she leaves, Usato opens his big mouth to mention his magic, and it catches Rose's attention. Welsi tries to protect Usato, but Rose pulls off some crazy stunts that are truly unladylike, and takes Usato to train him in healing magic. Rose takes him to a cabin where she introduces him to 5 of her goons, Tong, Mill, Alec, Gomel, and Gerd. After that, Usato goes to a room to rest as he prepares for the hell that awaits him the next day. Suzune and Kazuki come to check up on their friend to make sure he's alright. After Usato's words encourage Kazuki to do his best in this new world, the heroes leave. Then Rose comes out to give Usato a journal where he would document the final days of his life as he trains. His training starts off with sensing the mana inside him and gaining some basic information about the world. After that, the pain begins as he runs non-stop for a couple of days to build up his stamina. On day 6, he slowly starts using the healing magic, but Rose just uses this as an opportunity to make his training more deadly. Now that he has started using healing magic, Usato tends to survive a bit more, but he promises to write about the crazy woman in his journal.
Day 11.
819, 820.
Day 12.
On day 13, he starts running with weighted vests, and on day 14, Tong steals his lunch just for the fun of it. As if my guy isn't suffering enough already.
Used to the weights right away.
The following week, Suzune and Kazuki come to see him, and they see his spine nearly crushed by the boulders that Rose has piled on him. Suzune starts drooling at the sight of Usato's muscles.
That's how it is.
Once again, you need to keep in mind that her true nature is that of a crackhead. The Knight Commander, Siglis, who accompanied them, began to reprimand Rose for her training techniques, but Rose couldn't care less about what Siglis said. Usato leaves with the heroes to go have lunch somewhere else. The princess of the kingdom, Celia, introduces herself to him, and he immediately acts like how much of a peasant he is. While they enjoy the pie that was made by Celia, Usato and Kazuki talk about how their training has been going. Suzune couldn't hold it in any longer and tried touching Usato's muscles, but the conversation quickly shifted to how he had found his place in the kingdom. Only Lord knows what that girl was going to do to him. Tong then comes to bring Usato some lunch, but they end up brawling it out while the rest leave back to the castle.
Who stole that?
Let's make the most of it.
The next day, Rose slams a backpack on Usato and tells him they're going somewhere. They arrive at a forest called the Darkness of Linger, and she tells him to go down there and hunt a bear called a Grand Grizzly. Before he could finish complaining, Rose flings him into the air and he sees his flash before his eyes. Usato manages to break his fall with his healing magic, but immediately starts getting hunted by the creature he was told to kill. He finally builds up some guts to face, but 2 more bears show up, and you know this guy has the worst luck in history. Usato keeps running and jumps into a waterfall where he hides till the bears leave. He takes refuge in a tree and continues his hunt the next day. While following the bear's tracks, he finds a wounded rabbit which he heals. The rabbit starts to think that Usato is its mom and begins following him around. It eventually leads him to the cave of the bears. Thanks to his horrible survival skills, Usato gets poisoned after drinking water from a river. The rabbit leads him to a better source of water the next day, but it suddenly notices the presence of something dangerous. They go to investigate and find a humongous snake that's looking for its next kill. Usato manages to keep a low profile and continues monitoring the bears for a couple of days. The days pass, and he makes up his mind to go kill them. When he gets to their cave, he finds the dead body of the bears there, and only the cub survived. Filled with rage, Usato decides to help the cub avenge its parents. He should have just killed the cub and thanked the snake for helping out with his mission. The next day, he makes preparations and goes to hunt out the snake. He arrives at the location where the cub is getting its butt handed to it by the snake. Usato helps him out and manages to take out one of the snake's eyes. The serpent takes a bite of his arm, but he finally learns how to heal poison and get the venom out of his system. With the bear's help, they finally take down the snake.
Again, you dumbass!
While he lies on the floor, the serpent gets up to finish him, and right there he blames Rose for all the suffering in his life. Rose shows up and saves him from the snake with her gorilla-like strength. Usato finds out the rabbit is Rose's pet named Kukuru, and it was sent to keep an eye on him. Rose also tells him that the snake was created by the Demon Lord's army. Rose takes him with the bear, and they leave the forest. We then see the Demon Lord receiving a report from one of his army's commanders. The Demon Lord revealed the commander's name to be Amila, and her massive melons were more than enough for me to follow her every command. When she leaves, some crazy demon doctor named Hyreluk takes her to see his new experiment. It happens to look exactly like the snake that Usato fought, and we also see Hyreluk is terrible at giving names. Amila starts talking about the rescue team, which they refer to as the kidnappers given how they rescue their subordinates from the battlefield. She plans to use a demon called the Black Knight in their upcoming war to defeat them. The next day, Usato goes to feed his new bear pet and has named it Blurin. Rose comes to tell him that they've gotten permission to keep the bear, and Blurin realizes Rose is another predator it has to be wary of. Usato starts a simulation training by carrying Blurin on his back, while Tong and the rest try attacking. He gets tired quickly, and Rose tells him to run around town with Blurin on his back after resting. It seems this is a normal sight for the townspeople, and none of them are scared of the big bear and crazy kid running all over the place. They stop at a fruit vendor who gives Blurin a fruit after telling them that they're used to the rescue squad running around. I wonder what Rose has put these townspeople through. Usato continues his run and bumps into a fellow healer named Orga Fleur. Aside from Orga being a weakling who can barely run, Usato finds out the third healer is his sister. After their talk, Usato leaves to see Suzune and Kazuki. He sees Suzune who's training, and she goes crazy at the sight of Blurin. She tries to pet it, but the bear only sees her as either some kind of annoyance or food. The same goes for Usato, who's supposed to be the owner. Suzune tells him that Kazuki went to train with Siglis to get some fighting experience. After their discussion, Usato runs back home. He sees Rose that night and tells her how he has steeled his resolve to be a useful member of the team. In the morning, he gets a backpack dumped on him again, as Rose tells him that he'll be accompanying Suzune for her training that day. Usato joins Suzune in the morning, and she introduces him to Aruku and Korin, who would be accompanying them. Rose advises Suzune to be careful while telling Usato that he could die for all she cares. Kazuki is briefly shown as he practices his sword swings. Celia comes to show her concern for him, but I guess he's too dense to know the princess is head over heels for him. Back to Usato and his group as they head towards the darkness of Linger for their expedition. Suzune can't help herself around Blurin, and despite Usato's warnings, she gets her spine crushed while attempting to carry him. As they approach the forest, some bandits ambush them. Suzune is a bit too happy, and Usato starts sending out commands to her like she's some kind of Pokemon. A horde of boars suddenly stampeded through them and knocked Usato and Suzune into the air. They land inside a river leading to a waterfall where Usato hid earlier from the grizzlies. They head into a cave to take shelter, and Usato continues using Suzune as a Pokemon to light a fire and kill some fish with her thunder magic. Inside the cave, she comes across some monkeys that Usato warns her about. The stupid girl obviously has no survival skills and got bit by one of the venomous monkeys. Luckily, she was healed by him. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Kazuki finds out his friends have gone missing, but Rose assures him that Usato would be useful to keep Suzune and himself safe. That night, Suzune starts telling Usato about how she's comfortable in this world and doesn't mind abandoning her family and friends to remain there. You just know she was a problem child. Usato, who never had a life as well, feels the same way and understands her. They talk about how they'll protect the kingdom, and the conversation gets a bit awkward before Usato goes back to sleep. I'm surprised Suzune didn't seize the moment to take him on the cold floor. The next morning, Aruku and Blurin finally find them, thanks to Blurin's sharp nose. Blurin heads to its parents' grave for one last time before they all leave the forest. Suzune and Usato return to the castle safe and sound. Rose and Siglis are then told to stay back while they leave. Kazuki and Celia meet up with them as they leave. Suzune tells Kazuki that he was reckless for trying to go look for them, but Usato immediately reminds her of her stupid actions with the venomous monkey. Suzune shuts him up before he reveals any more of her silliness. While Suzune and Usato leave, Celia requests that Kazuki call her on a first-name basis. How stupid do you have to be to fumble a princess? Meanwhile, in the throne room, the king tells Siglis and Rose that the demon army has started making their move. He tells Siglis to ready his troops to be mobilized at any moment while Rose waits behind. Lloyd tells Rose to go scout out the whereabouts of the demon army, and also requests that she return to leading the troops. Rose refuses the request because she still blames herself for the loss of her comrades. Back at the cabin that night, Usato receives a letter from Rose to deliver a message to a certain location. Luckily, he wouldn't be training his life away. Meanwhile, the demon army seems to be building a bridge to cross into Linger. Amila is having a hard time with the Black Knight, who finds her quite insignificant. Rose shows up and hurls a log at their bridge to delay them. The next day, Usato goes on his mission, and he seems to be drawing more attention with him looking normal and not running around. This town really has problems. He passes the fruit vendor and promises to come back and pick up the fruits she offered him. He arrives at the clinic where the Fleur siblings work. Orga's sister meets him and introduces herself as Ururu, while showing how much of a short-term memory she has. They go inside to see Orga healing a little boy, and after that, Usato hands him the letter. Ururu tells him how she can't heal herself just like her brother, and I wonder how two siblings ended up being so useless to themselves. A man comes in to ask for Orga's help with healing someone who fell off a roof. They get there, and with Orga's advice, Usato is able to help properly heal one of the injured. As Usato leaves, Orga tells his sister that the letter is to inform them about the upcoming war. On his way back, Usato picks up the fruits, and a fox-eared girl named Amako meets him. She shows him a vision where people are dying, and he sees Suzune and Kazuki get killed by the Black Knight. Amako runs off and hides while Usato searches for her. Rose bumps into him fussing about the situation, and he makes some snarky comments about how scary she is. Rose grabs him by the head and nearly crushes whatever form of sense is left in his skull. Rose briefs him on her scouting mission, and they start heading back. She tells him that Amako is a beastkin that showed up 2 years ago, and the little girl has managed to dodge kidnappers who see her kind as valuable prey. Usato asks if they can see illusions, and she tells him of the ones known as Oracles of Time, who can see the future. But he hides the reason for asking from her. Hopefully, this doesn't result in him getting his skull crushed again. Rose goes to report to the king while Usato goes home. After the king receives her report, he requests for Kazuki and Suzune to come see him. Meanwhile, Usato, who's having a hard time getting some sleep, is visited by Kazuki. They head out and the hero confesses that he's too much of a wimp to be going to war. Usato cheers him up and talks about how he's made up his mind to protect the kingdom, despite being a third wheel in the summoning process. His words strike a spot in Kazuki's head, and the hero decides to be useful as well. They share a romantic bro moment, and it's getting a bit too close for comfort. Suzune shows herself after Kazuki leaves, but she has nothing to worry about after hearing Usato encourage him. The next morning, King Lloyd gives a speech to bolster the morale of the troops as they prepare for war. After that, Kazuki goes to see Celia to let her know about his departure. He finally calls her on a first-name basis, and you just know it aroused different parts of her body. Meanwhile, at the rescue team cabin, Ururu is trying to be friendly with Blurin and Kukuru, while her brother gets crushed by the cargo from their cart. Rose called Usato to her room, and I suspected this was finally his end. He gets there, and she gives him a pep talk on how to go about healing soldiers on the battlefield. She then hands him his new uniform and tells him to remember to protect both himself and his subordinates on the battlefield. As the rescue team heads out to a different location, Rose describes how strong the demons are to Usato. We then see when Rose was a battalion commander of the Linger Knights 5 years earlier. After a meeting with the king, Rose and Siglis talk about how the demon army is likely to invade. Siglis leaves to make sure the troops will be ready, while Rose is lost in thought. Some short shrimp keeps disturbing her like a lost puppy, until Rose finally pummels her. It didn't help that the girl was eavesdropping on their meeting, which made Rose batter her some more. On their way to the rescue team cabin, Owl talks in a way that makes Rose want to oversee her training that afternoon. How did this one even get to be a member of the squad? At the cabin, the other soldiers address Owl as the deputy commander. They gang up on her when Rose says she'll be overseeing their training. Owl asks for Rose's help, but she gets ignored like an insignificant insect. A week later, the king asks Rose to go investigate the demons that have been attacking monsters in their territory. Rose briefs her troops back at the cabin that night. Owl tries to boost their morale, but she's reminded about how much of a nuisance she is. They head out the next day and set up camp somewhere in the woods that night. After Owl briefed them on the next place to investigate, they all went to bed while Rose kept watch. Rose notices that Owl is having trouble sleeping and offers to help her. We all know how that would have turned out. Owl gets up and starts telling Rose how she feels she's unfit to be her deputy. After Owl's heartfelt story about how Rose is the only one who stands up to her stubbornness, Rose just flicks her forehead. She tells her deputy how she's very fit to be the next in line, which is quite surprising. I had no idea the crazy woman had any form of compassion left in her. They head out the next day and find claw marks of a glowwolf on some trees. They hear some sounds and rush to see the demons capturing monsters and locking them up. Rose takes on their leader while her troops fight the rest of the demon lackeys.
They be your blade.
Party tricks! There you are!
She pulls out some crazy moves while tossing trees at the demon who uses wind magic.
All you want after I'm done!
He then introduces himself as Nero and summons a sword. It seems like the main fight has only just begun. The rescue team guys are giving the demons a hard time while Rose continues fighting with Nero. The demon leader sees them as a very big threat and bolsters the morale of his troops. One by one, Rose's teammates start getting chopped up like meat by the demons. Rose gets really angry and lets her guard down, which leads to Nero slicing out one of her eyes. The cut caused her mana to be sapped away, and she couldn't heal her teammates. Nero was about to finish her off when Owl took the hit to protect her commander. With the little strength left, Rose starts to beat Nero all over the place until she can hardly move.
See, I glance of the light! The end is ah!
When she's about to kill him, a young Amila shows up to save Nero. Rose was confused as to why scum like him should have such a pretty girl saving him. She goes back to heal Owl, but the wound can't be healed, and her deputy dies in her arms. Rose returns to inform the king about what happened. After telling the king that the demon lord would return in the future, she requested to be removed as a battalion commander and as a knight. On her way to the cabin, the parents of one of her subordinates meet and thank her for returning their son to them. Rose spends the rest of her days sulking, as if she's not the same crazy woman that trains people to death. A month later, Siglis comes to make sure she's not dead. When he leaves, Rose sees a vision of her subordinates cheering her up. She decided not to heal her eye and left it as a sign to remind her of what she lost. That was when she decided to create the rescue squad to save people from the battlefield. Back to the present, Usato starts getting praised by Rose, and she tells him how precious he is. I guess she's not all bronze and a meathead. At the same time, the demon army has finally completed their bridge. They begin invading the kingdom of Linger, while the Black Knight hopes the kidnappers would be very entertaining. Usato comes out of his tent where he and the rest of the soldiers have set up camp. Suzune comes to show off her armor to him, but Usato is hardly impressed. She then makes remarks about how he should soothe her heart. I guess she wants to get it on before going into battle. I completely understand. Kazuki comes to his rescue and drags away this crazy woman before she damages Usato. Sieglis tells the heroes how they'd go about the battle as they prepare to engage the demons. The demons show up and they all launch magic attacks, but unfortunately, it is just an illusion. The demon army then ambushes them from behind, and the heroes rush to the scene. Rose sends out Tong and the rest to go bring back any injured, while Orga and Ururu will stay back at the tent. She and Usato will join the Fleur siblings until injuries start escalating on the battlefield. Not long after, the guys started bringing in the injured and Usato was quite surprised. The demon army is really beating up the humans and turning them into mashed potatoes. While they engage the large snake that Hyrule created, one of the soldiers stabbed the Black Knight. The soldier immediately got hurt, while the knight was unaffected. Luckily, one of the rescue team members came and scooped him up from the battlefield. Usato and Rose then head out to the battlefield to help the troops. Hopefully, this mistaken summon would be able to keep his cool. Rose gives him some kind of secret technique in case he needs to kill someone. The two healers begin swooping injured soldiers and healing them as fast as they can. Meanwhile, the heroes are confronted by the Black Knight. The soldiers around stupidly attack the Demon Knight and end up as more burden for the rescue team. Kazuki attacks the Black Knight with magic, and that's when they find out that any attack on the knight would be reflected. Usato, on the other hand, is getting disturbed by the visions from earlier and heads to where the heroes are. Hopefully, he makes it on time and doesn't end up like Rose. Suzune and Kazuki try to attack the Black Knight from a blind spot. The knight fools them and plays along with their tricks just to get them close enough, and Kazuki gets stabbed. All the damage is then reflected to the heroes, and they fall to the ground. Is this the end of our dear heroes? As Suzune falls to the ground, she starts remembering how she met Usato and how he accepted her for who she was in this new world. I guess she was sad that she wasn't able to make babies with him. Usato finally shows up and punches the Black Knight, who was about to finish off the heroes. He starts healing them, and the Black Knight gets up, revealing a female demon inside the cracked helmet. Usato takes the heroes and carries them out of there before the crazy knight comes to kill them. The knight eventually catches up with them, and Usato has no choice but to start throwing hands. The Black Knight seems very angry that Usato's attacks are not being reflected. He's just covering himself in healing magic and pulling out some mad Bruce Lee moves on the knight. He envelops his hand in a lot of magic and lets the knight have a taste of his fist. This destroys the Black Knight's armor, and we get to see one of the most beautiful demons ever.
He's taking on the Black...
That's with him not dropping his healing state. Maximum health, but isn't this going...
Healing magic?
Knight sends my way.
If not for the war, she would have been the perfect bride for me. With the Black Knight defeated, the demons started retreating slowly. Suzune then got really curious about Usato's powerful punch. He explained the concept of it being that he just knocks out his opponent while healing them. Suzune sees he has really fallen under Rose's influence, and maybe she's slowly losing interest in making babies with him. Usato returns to the camp with Rose so that the soldiers can finish up their work. One of the demon soldiers reports back to Emila about the Black Knight's defeat, and she decides to retreat from the battle. Kazuki and Suzune kill the giant snake while the rescue team continues their healing operations. Rose commends Usato for doing a good job and rescuing the heroes. If not for him, they would have died because Rose was definitely not going to show up. Due to the accumulated exhaustion and running out of both stamina and mana, Usato passes out on Rose's melons. Lucky guy. At the cabin, Usato is talking to Blurin and telling him how he received an award from the king after the battle. Gomel shows up and tells him someone from the castle wants to see him, and he also tells Usato to be careful when cutting through town. The stupid boy obviously didn't take Gomel's advice and went through town. He got surrounded by the townspeople, and finally became popular enough to take back the spotlight in his show. When he gets to the throne room, the king asks for his help with interrogating the Black Knight. Apparently, the knight requested to see him before answering their questions any further. Usato rushes to the knight after remembering that she might still be seriously injured. He enters her cell and heals her, which melts away her armor. When he's done, she doesn't let go of his arm because she wants to feel the warmth for longer. Look who's pulling in the ladies now. Hopefully, she's not deceiving him. After that, Rose starts training Usato again to build up his stamina and reflexes. In this training session, he has to dodge Rose's punches. Well, it might as well be the end of the anime. Somehow, he managed to survive for 3 days. He got a day off training and went to see the Black Knight. Since when are they so close that he goes to visit her in prison? He leaves the prison and comes across Celia, who's watching Kazuki train. They thank him for his efforts during the war, and Kazuki mistakenly says that he nearly died. As Usato leaves, Kazuki feels the fear of a woman who's in love for the first time in his life. Rose goes to the Black Knight's cell and puts a collar that seals mana on her neck. Rose plans to take her under her wing at the request of the king. Now the Black Knight is going to see the true demon in this show. On her way out, Rose kicks Usato, who's running some laps with Blurrin. He sees that she has taken the Black Knight as an errand runner for the rescue team. That night, Rose tells Usato that he's been chosen alongside the heroes to help form alliances with other nations at the request of the king. Bro is really moving up in the world. The next he goes to buy some stuff at the market and some girls are standing there while they fawn over him. It should have been me. Suzune bumps into him and he sees Amako by the corner of his eye. He rushes to the Beastkin girl who asks him to help save her mother. Suzune gets way too excited at the sight of Amako and ends up just being more of a nuisance. Usato puts the Beastkin down while she asks to continue their conversation in private. Meanwhile, Black Knight is getting close to the Pearly Gates, or in her case, the Burning Gates, as she starts her training with Rose. Inside the cabin, Usato and Suzune continue their discussion with Amako. The fox girl tells him that she has a magic ability that lets her see the future. The vision she showed Usato, she had it about a year ago, and now that she's found him, she can't let him go. Even the little girls want a piece of him now. Amako then asks Usato once again to save her mother. He decides that he can make a stop at her home on their way to the other country they're being sent to. Usato tells Rose about the Beastkin girl, and she says that the king has to be informed immediately. If one of them is in their kingdom, it could lead to war with the Beastkin territory. What's with this kingdom and their potential wars with everyone? Usato returned to tell Amako that it would take a while, but it seemed like she already predicted what he would say. Meanwhile, Suzune felt like she was losing to the little girl and said they had started communicating with their eyes. How can your rival be a little girl? Usato gives the Black Knight a diary at dinner to help her document her suffering. She continues her running routine until one day when she diverts to figure out the noise she was hearing in the forest. There, she saw Usato getting pummeled by Rose, but he eventually managed to dodge one of her attacks before having his lights knocked out. Rose tells Black Knight to continue training under Usato's orders. While under a tree, Black Knight finally introduces herself as Felm. Finally, she has a name. I thought her parents weren't even bothered to give her one. After that, Blurrin shows up and Usato starts running with it. Felm sped past them because she didn't want to lose to him. That night, Rose tells Usato to go see the king and take Amako with him. Felm was eavesdropping on their conversation, and she ran away the following morning. In the throne room, King Lloyd thanks Amako for helping to save the kingdom. He tells Usato that his last destination to deliver missives would be Mialark. Opposite its shores is where the Beastkin territory is. After that, Welsi briefs Usato on his travel route and where he would part ways with the heroes. He then goes to recruit Aruku as one of the knights that would accompany him. Meanwhile, Felm finally met her end when Rose caught her running away. She wanted to go with Usato on his journey because of how madly in love she was with him now. That evening, after Usato talks with Felm, Rose comes to tell him to beat up anyone who says healing magic is weak. When it comes down to it, she really is just nothing but a raging monkey. The next morning, Usato and their heroes say their goodbyes and set off on their journey to new places. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content.